Trudeau, man. After he writes the book. Thank you. Kneel down. Kneel down.
On Friday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took a knee at an anti-racism rally. Now, this is kind of odd, as the whole point of this protest is to protest people in power that can actually do something about these sorts of policies that have held, whether it's the black community or in Canada, the Indigenous population, been held down, been criminalized by our system for years. People in power, like, say, the Prime Minister of Canada, could actually do something about that as opposed to just kneeling. But before I go any further, let me just show you this video here. It's going to be kind of choppy because of the way I'm recording this, but I mean, you get the point. But I'm showing you this because, look, he looks at the camera first and foremost, looks at the camera before doing anything, and then watch him go down on one knee. Like this is supposed to do something when he's the Prime Minister and can actually do something. Now, this was reported on in a number of places. The Guardian here puts out this headline: Justin Trudeau takes a knee but is silent on reforms to policing. Canadian PM attends Ottawa rally but would not be drawn on new policies to tackle racism. And they quote Andre Demise here, who I think has a great quote. Let me just read this. After he knelt with protesters, a number of attendees thanked him for the gesture, but for others, Trudeau's actions rang hollow. Quote, "I'm not interested in bullshit publicity stunts, especially now," said Andre Demise, a Toronto-based writer. "How the hell can you kneel against police brutality when everything in your record indicates you have no problem with it? It boggles the mind to watch him turn to the camera, almost like he was confirming that he was being filmed and kneeling." Now, apart from Trudeau's own personal issues, when it comes to racism that I've covered before in the past, there's just the simple fact that he is the Prime Minister and can actually do something to deal with a lot of this. So Vice News put out a piece here that breaks down some of what he could be doing. They go on here to say, while Trudeau was mum on individual priorities on Friday, there's been no lack of priorities that have been called for by police and justice reform advocates in recent years. Some of them have even been endorsed by the governing Liberals but not implemented. While policing is a municipal and provincial concern in many cities and municipalities, the federal government is responsible for the policies of the RCMP. Across Canada, roughly 1 in 4 officers are members of the federal police force and provide police services for many parts of the country, including the entirety of the territories. Even though RCMP officers are the main police force for huge swaths of the country, there is no investigative body that is tasked to investigate cases where RCMP officers use force. There is the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, which can take in complaints about officers' actions, but can only make recommendations to the RCMP, which is not obligated to actually implement them. What's more, the Civilian Commission has seen a huge rise in complaints without a corresponding increase in resources, leading to a backlog. So the issues with complaints is one thing with the RCMP that could be addressed, but there are others. So the Vice News piece also touches on a number of these other points, that the RCMP doesn't have body cameras. They actually had a trial run with these body cameras, and internally, apparently it was a success, but they ended up not continuing to use them. And the suspected reason is because of cost. Also, the RCMP does not publish stats on its own use of force. So the lack of transparency there when it comes to what the RCMP does, something that could obviously be addressed. There's no independent oversight on Canadian Border Services. Another issue here, a lot of complaints in terms of how the Canadian Border Services operates, in terms of who they target. No oversight on that. And there's also the need to address mass incarceration when it comes to the Indigenous community and the Black community, which, I mean, are incarcerated in Canada at much, much higher rates than anybody else. So all of this should be addressed by the man in charge, the Prime Minister, but kneeling is his go-to. Now, look, maybe this is the start of a bigger project here, but I just think it's kind of tone deaf to kneel during this protest when you can actually be doing something substantial. Or at the very least, if you want to kneel, I guess, but also discuss specifically what you are doing in terms of policies, and don't just say, well, now we're having conversations. No, that is not good enough. If you're going to kneel, have some actual specific issues you are going to tackle as the Prime Minister, or specific policies you're going to implement. One more thing I want to share here. This was a great point made by Lefty Mind on Twitter. Just so people are aware, the man who created the largest racial profiling program in Canada, while as chief of Toronto's police, which included carding and street checks, was appointed by Justin Trudeau to essentially be the head of the RCMP, Bill Blair. So Bill Blair is former chief of police in Toronto, now a Liberal MP, and yes, indeed, he was given this role by Justin Trudeau. He's now the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. So this is what Trudeau's actions, his actions actually show. And this is very similar to when it comes to climate issues. About a year ago, Justin Trudeau also joined a climate protest while he was in the process, and still is in the process of building oil pipeline, of building an oil pipeline. So bought a pipeline, is building a pipeline, and joins a climate protest. And by the way, he was called out by climate activists like Greta Thunberg, who called out Trudeau and his empty gestures when it comes to this sort of thing. So this is what he does, and really, it isn't just Trudeau. This is what the Liberals do. They're always putting forward this image that they are doing something when in reality they aren't. And the issue when it comes to this anti-racism rally, just another example in a long line of examples of empty gestures.